reaction to a story that has thousands of people talking right now on our KARE 11 Facebook page. Statistics show a large percentage of military service members are declining to get the COVID-19 vaccine. Air Force Major General Jeff Taliaferro says very early data suggests 2/3 of the service members offered the vaccine have accepted, which is higher than the rate of the general population, which is about 50%. According to the Associated Press, refusal rates vary across each service and depend on the member's age, unit, location, deployment status, and other factors, which makes it harder for officials to find the most persuasive arguments for getting a vaccine. Vice Admiral Andrew Lewis, commander of the Navy's Second Fleet, shared this photo of himself getting the vaccine on Twitter, encouraging others to do the same when it's available to them. He said last week that a COVID vaccine currently isn't mandatory, but will be as soon as possible, just like the flu shot. This story has a lot of people buzzing online, debating vaccine safety, personal choice, and sharing their own experience with the vaccine. Kay thinks it should be their choice. She says they should have the right, like anyone else, share information about it to service members and keep it at that. Joe says he declined a vaccine and that no pitch is going to work to convince him. But Eric, he tells us he's a veteran that got both vaccine doses about a month ago. He says no side effects, no problems. I just hope it's effective and prevents COVID. So there's a lot of interesting information in this story. If you'd like to read more about it, just head to our website, KARE11.com. But yeah, definitely great arguments brought up.
Yeah, I wonder also if it has to do with the hierarchy and the chain of command in the military, where if somebody superior doesn't get it, if you kind of follow suit.
Right.
Yeah, well, right now, let's get over to